Well, I wanted to start my time with you this morning with a contest. Aha, I hope you're nice and wide awake. Actually, the music we've had has been so beautiful, and the children's faces so magnificent. I know you're all wide awake, and just to be sure that this part of the service, that you don't fall asleep, that I want to engage you in this contest. Today, the focus of our service, as you can tell, is love. And actually, every service that we offer is wrapped up in love, God's love for us. We come every week to be reminded of that. One of the things about love in our modern culture is that it's become kind of, we hear it all the time in love stories. We talk mostly in our culture about romantic love. And so I thought that I would see if you know or remember or hear some of the examples of romantic love that permeate our culture. That's the most common love that we talk about, actually publicly, is romantic love. And so you need to just shout this out when I'm finished, each question or what I'm going to do. Are you ready? Look, you're so excited. You can hardly wait, can you? Okay? So you have to tell me the person who sang this song. Every night in my dreams I see you. Ta-da! What is it from? Titanic. All of you saw it, of course. You know them standing on the prow of the ship like this, and all I could think, I'm glad they're in a studio somewhere because I would fall off and into the ocean. All right, see how you know it. I will always love you. What? Whitney Houston. See, you know this romantic love. What was it from? What movie was it from? The Bodyguard. Boy, you're terrific. And I know that you're really impressed with my singing. Actually, that's why Kathy hasn't asked me to be a part of the group here. Singing's a little bit thin. Okay, here's a poem, a love poem that I'm going to offer to you. Can you tell me who wrote it? How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and the breadth and the height. Yes? Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Very good. Clapping all around. All right, one more. We are weaned, this one might be harder for you. We are weaned from our timidity in the flush of love's light. We dare to be brave, and suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. I knew I'd get you on that one. It comes from, any guesses? Maya Angelou. She was a brilliant poet and wrote lots of love poems. So what I've offered you today is that romantic love that we are most familiar with in our culture, because it is a love that it is more on the surface. And sometimes we want to stay there and be on the surface because it feels safer. But I want to talk to you this morning about agape love. And I was so, Lorraine in her beautiful prayer mentioned agape, the agape hospice. I've been there many times. And agape is a Greek word meaning unconditional love. Universal unconditional love that transcends and persists regardless of circumstances. And so that's that whenever you need to go to the agape, and I've been there quite often, of course, is that sense. Every time I go, I hear the Greek agape, and I know it stands for unconditional love. There are a couple of people who've spoken about unconditional love in our culture, and certainly theologians speak about this unconditional, universal love that transcends and persists regardless of circumstances. Karl Barth, who is a brilliant theologian of the 20th century, I had to read a lot of him when I was in seminary. That was hard work. I've made it easier for you. So this is something that he says about unconditional love. Humanity does not merely express its nature, but transcends it in unconditional love. Humanity does not merely express its nature, but transcends it. Agape identifies with the interests of the neighbor in utter independence of the question of his attractiveness and with the expectation of reciprocity. See, that's why Karl Barth was hard to read. But what he's saying there is that our human nature is to look after number one. And in fact, our consumer capitalist economic model that we live in is based on looking after number one. For example, when I watch the news in the evening, I am bombarded with commercials all of the time. All of the time. I get a snippet of news and then I get commercials. And it is based on the presumption that you may not need something, but you'll end up wanting it because they tell you often enough that they do. And it's about me. It's about my hemorrhoids or my teeth or my whatever, but it is about me. You have to have this in order to have a full, rich life. So what Barth is saying here is that we, in unconditional love, transcend that. We transcend the nature within us, which is almost, we're almost hardwired. And this is in a fight and flight kind of way. We have to take care of ourselves, of course. But we can get really unhealthy with that. That looking after number one is what we do. And we are not particularly concerned about how that affects someone else in the world. Our consumer society is that way. I need to have those new designer jeans. No matter that in Islamabad there are people and children who are working in sweatshops to provide me with those jeans. So I have to have them. Have to have them. With little thought of the consequences of that. So agape love calls us to transcend that and think of our neighbor. He says here, we identify, when we're expressing agape love, we are identifying with the interests of our neighbor in utter independence of the question of his attractiveness. That means we go to our neighbor because we are compelled by our agape love for humanity, to come to our neighbor and to offer love and assistance in any way that we can. So this is, sometimes it's so much easier, isn't it, to express love, especially agape love, when someone kind of looks like us, acts like us, dresses like us, smells like us, speaks the same language as us. It's so much easier. But when we come up against those things that are different, when we come up against the other, then gets a little dodgier, a little more difficult for us. And when he says, with no expectation of reciprocity, that means you expect nothing in return. That you go to that person with unconditional love because they have a need and you want to offer it to them, expecting nothing in return. See, our consumer model is not based on that. And so we become kind of hardwired. We want to make the deal. We want to make sure we make the deal. We might be okay with someone does okay, but we want to make the deal. We want to get something out of it. So that's part of how difficult it is then for us to enter into this agape love. And an Anglican theologian, O.C. Quick, said this. He writes that agape love within human experience is a very partial and rudimentary realization, and that in its pure form, it is essentially divine. So he's saying, Mr. Quick, that in this life it's pretty hard for us to get it, to offer this unconditional love all the time in every situation. But when we have the moments when we do that, not expecting anything in return, but from the heart, erupting from the heart, then it's divine. In its purest form, it is divine. And that brings me to Jesus. That brings me to Jesus. Do you know, he didn't always offer unconditional love. If you remember that story, so that tells me about his humanity. I need to say that. I love Jesus because of his humanity, because I see myself in him. I can see myself in him. One day, he was tired and walking with his disciples, and he cursed a fig tree because it didn't have what he wanted at that moment. He cursed the fig tree. He didn't offer patience and say, or thinking, you know, maybe this isn't the season for this fig tree to produce. Maybe I should be a little more patient with that and come back around at another time, and maybe this fig tree will have something to offer me. So you see, at times, Jesus in his humanity, and that's why I love Jesus, is because he shows me in the living of his life that it ain't easy, that it isn't easy for us to pour out ourselves and to offer unconditional love. I've offered in the sermon title, based on love, 4 things that I think might help us moving toward. Remember, too, that unconditional love and expecting nothing in return, but part of unconditional love is also being able to name things that aren't right. There's something wrong here, and I need to be brave and to name it, so that unconditional love can occur, can bubble up, and can be real. So, love. L is for listening. That sense, doesn't it drive you crazy when you meet someone and greet someone and already they're looking over their shoulder to see what's coming along that might be better than you? And I want to say to each and every one of you, after church on Sunday mornings, sometimes I get distracted and someone else will tug me away, but I want you to know that I'm fully present with you when we're speaking to one another, because your life matters to me, just as it matters to Jesus and to God. And so that sense that act of listening, where we're truly present with someone, truly present in their aura, not in in their face, but listening to the brokenness perhaps of their heart. Maybe they just need you to listen, because there's lots of times in this life when it seems like nobody's listening. We're all got our little earbuds, or we're looking at our texting or whatever. But that act of listening is a very important part of love, because it's in that listening actively and with an open heart that we can get the signals perhaps of what's going on in that person's life that they need to share with us. O is for other. In our world, which is so fractured and broken in some parts of it, it is the fear of the other that is driving so much of our divisions and divisiveness. It is absolute fear of the other. I can't tell you on my Facebook feed how many derogatory comments I get about Muslims. I try to block those, but sometimes they come through others who've opened them up. Or not even, that's certainly about Muslims, but all manner of other things. Like the hatred that seems to exist between political parties and the things they say to each other or about each other. Did you know, for example, that Rachel Notley has had 11 credible death threats against her life? 11 credible death threats that the police have to circle around her to keep her safe. She's the premier of our province. And yes, I don't know what your political inclinations are. I don't need to know that. But I do need to know that we live in respect with one another. That she is offering a vision of how the province might be run, as the people who for 44 years had that right when they were elected as well. What does this speak of us as a community, as a province, as people who live in this province with all the rest of the people in our country? Some of the things I hear about our French Canadians and our sisters and brothers in BC at the moment. Wait a minute. We're Canadians together. And yes, we have disagreements, absolutely. But that doesn't give us a right to offer death threats or call people dreadful names. Love is not about those things. And part of what's driving that is a desire for me. I'm going to have this pipeline built. I'm going to save the shores, because it ends up often being about me. So it's time to move it to they and to us and to the other. That each one of us matters in this. And it doesn't help the discourse, does it? When we call each other names. I don't think God's in the mix of that, for sure. So that sense of the other that is so fearful for us. I want to share a story with you. And many of you, because you know the movies so well, I don't know if you saw the movie The Zookeeper's Wife. And it's based on a true story of what happened in Warsaw, Poland in about 1939 when Poland was bombed. There was, the name of the people are Jan, and her name, it's gone from me at the moment, Zabrinski is the last name. And the Zabrinskis were the zookeepers of this incredible zoo in Warsaw. And it was bombed when the Nazis took over Poland. And for the next 5 years, when Warsaw and Poland was being occupied by the Nazis, these two people risked their life every day to hide and protect Jews. They saved over 300 Jews and had them in their home and had them in the basement and hid them away. And they are now, the state of Israel has declared them to be righteous among the nations. Oskar Schindler is also on that list of non-Jewish people who risked everything. The Zabrinskis risked everything, expecting nothing in return and willing to give their life. And they were on the edge of death every day. That's an example to me of unconditional love. Certainly of the other. They were Roman Catholic. Warsaw was a Roman Catholic country. Poland was a Roman Catholic country. And they offered unconditional love to their Jewish sisters and brothers. They could not bear the sight of children being put in trains and shuttled across their country to concentration camps. And they risked their lives for those people. Powerful, powerful example of unconditional love for the other. Vision. Often when we get kind of bogged down in what's going on in our own lives, and yes, our lives are important, it's hard for us to open up the possibility that there's a vision that God has for our world. A vision that is powerful. And it comes through us in this John passage. Jesus says to us, love one another. Love one another. And that's a vision for the world that is powerful, that embraces all of humanity. And sometimes when we get bogged down with the things, the particularities of our life or our community or our country or our culture, we lose a sense of that vision. And my God is not a God in a box. My God is so incredibly wide. Incredibly wide. My God has a vision for us as people living together in love and celebrating our differences. Saying, wow, wasn't God creative? Look at that fine, the Philippines. Look at those fine and beautiful people over there. Look at those fine and beautiful people in Iran and in North Korea and all those places, some of those places that I know we feel are fearful and it's difficult because, of course, we have to assume and hope that sense of unconditional love will somehow find its way into their hearts. But we can't give up on it. Because then what does the world become? What does the world become? It becomes a hateful, hurtful place where we live in little enclaves and keep ourselves safe with big guns and big bombs. That's no vision. That's no vision for the world. And E is for embracing. Embracing. That makes sense, doesn't it? But remembering always that in that embracing, we are called to model the ministry of Christ, who gave up his own very life, for what he believed in and the God he served. So to embrace this vision of unconditional love is to lead a risky life. I can promise you no rose gardens, none whatsoever. I can say that there will be perhaps hurt and rejection or loss or pain. But Jesus said to us, love one another. And we are called to do the same. May we go forth with courage to be the people of the way, the followers of the way, the followers of Jesus Christ, who loved the world unconditionally. Amen.